We're going to talk about this executive order of yours that comes from 2023-16, where I'm not going to read it all because I don't have the time. But one thing I want to point out is how you made it clear that you're going to stick these people in our neighborhoods and that we have to just accept it. That's absolutely not, because we've talked about this since last year, when most of you older people who did not stand up with us and reject the sanctuary city. Now, I got a problem with that. And I spoke that on December 14th. So I think we need to cut down the staff of the older people here. How about that? Because you all are not all representing us. How about those who stood up and represented us? Then you stay in your offices. But the rest of you, goodbye. Because that's how we're going to see it when it's time to vote. WOTC, Work Opportunity Tax Credit. 400 plus businesses. Hyatt, which is Pritzker's company, all are hiring refugees and kicking all of y'all out. Now, how about that for news that's not being broadcast? See, I do my digging, I do my research, and all of you all will know when I step up here to this mic, I bring the facts. I don't bring no opinions. So you all need to be careful of how you think you're treating us, because we coming for this. We bringing our city back. We removing all these illegals that's breaking our rules and laws, and we're fed up.
Let's talk about this executive order that was entered and signed on his first day in office. Office of the Mayor, City of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, Mayor, Executive Order Point 2023-16, Executive Order on Immigrant, Migrant, and Refugee Rights. Whereas, throughout Chicago's history, immigrants from across the world have built and strengthened the social, economic, and cultural fabric of the city of Chicago, the city. And whereas a Black Haitian immigrant, Jean-Baptiste Dusable, is recognized as the founder of our city, and whereas the foundation of our city today was built by the vibrant and important history and struggles of the indigenous people and Native Americans who lived and thrived on this land for many years before settlers first came to the region, and whereas the city of Chicago is located on the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe, or the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, and whereas Chicago also has a history as a refuge to many different peoples, including those who came here to escape enslavement, oppression, and climate change, and whereas Chicago became one of the first sanctuary cities in the country on July 18, 1982, when Wellington Avenue Church congregation voted to become just the second church in the U.S. to provide a safe haven for Central Americans fleeing political oppression and violence. And whereas Mayor Harold Washington signed an executive order on March 7, 1985, halting city agencies' cooperation with federal immigration authorities, and whereas the ongoing crisis of newly arriving asylum seekers and migrants into the city of Chicago has illuminated the immense challenges that the city must face and overcome in order to provide support and services to our new arrivals. And whereas hundreds of mutual aid volunteers across the city have worked tirelessly to meet the moment by organizing and providing food, donations, beds, supplies, and interpretation services, and whereas to meet the needs of newly arrived community members, it is necessary to coordinate the city's existing resources through an executive department within the mayor's office. And whereas, while our federal immigration system needs to adapt humanely to the current global challenges driving immigration, Chicago will continue to provide a safe haven and home for new arrivals. And whereas, in supporting new arrivals, the city of Chicago must reckon with our existing systemic inequities that many communities already face related to housing, safety, and other supportive services, particularly Black and undocumented communities. And whereas the Black immigrant population in Chicago has been growing steadily in the last few years, reflecting a nationwide trend, with the foreign-born African community growing by more than 50% between 2005 and 2017. And whereas there are few community and advocacy groups dedicated to the specific needs of Chicago's Black immigrant population, including language access resources for immigrants arriving from non-English-speaking countries, or that even with high levels of education, Black immigrants tend to earn low wages compared to other similarly trained immigrant or Native workers. And whereas addressing these long-standing issues will require meaningful and proactive community engagement and support, and whereas the Chicago Office of New Americans must provide significant direction, services, and resources for both newly arrived community members along with existing immigrant communities, including, but not limited to, DACA recipients, undocumented students, and people applying for citizenship. And whereas The role of the Office of New Americans can be elevated and expanded further to allow it to better serve communities across Chicago. And, whereas the City of Chicago finds it necessary and appropriate to create a position within the Executive Department to lead the City of Chicago's efforts to support newly arrived community members, immigrants, refugees, migrants, undocumented community members, DACA recipients, people applying for citizenship, and others. Now, therefore, I, 3 Randon Johnson, Mayor of the City of Chicago, do hereby order as follows. Section 1. The above whereas clauses are incorporated into and made an integral part of this order. Section 2. A deputy mayor for immigrant, migrant, and refugee rights is established in the mayor's office, and this deputy mayor will have such staff as are necessary for effective functioning of this office. Section 3. The deputy mayor for immigrant, migrant, and refugee rights is responsible for coordination and communication between all applicable city departments and officials related to the city's efforts to support newly arrived community members, immigrants, refugees, migrants, undocumented community members, DACA recipients, and people applying for citizenship. All city department heads are directed to undertake whatever efforts are feasible pursuant to their powers and duties, and to direct their employees accordingly, to work with the deputy mayor for immigrant, migrant, and refugee rights consistent with the purposes of this order. Section 4. The deputy mayor will provide recommendations to me, with urgency, with proposals for inclusion in the city's fiscal year 2024 budget on programs, policies, and expenditures to support newly arrived community members along with existing immigrant, migrant, and refugee community members. Section 5. This order will take effect upon its execution, and filing with the city clerk is received and filed May 15th, 2023. City Clerk.
As listed on Britannica.com, John Kinsey was noted, but then founded Jean Baptiste Point du Sable, thought to have first occupied the area at the mouth of the Chicago River in the late 18th century. Du Sable built a cabin and a prosperous trading post that served Native Americans and European traders. Having been born in what is now Haiti to a French sailor and an enslaved woman of African descent, been married to a Potawatomi woman, and sold his property in 1800, Du Sable was unlike the typical founding father, and so he was largely left out of Chicago's history. The city did not recognize Du Sable as its official founder until 2006. Native American was first to occupy in Chicago.
Now you can see and hear the concerns of the citizens in the city of Chicago. This is not the purpose of the sanctuary city, and Brandon Johnson took it upon himself to nearly wipe out our revenue and fill in the gaps by upcharging the citizens through taxes and various other means. Brandon Johnson will potentially try to run again in the 2027 mayoral race, along with other prospective candidates. Learn what not to support to hold such an office for the city of Chicago. No more Brandon Johnson or anyone like him.